Hey up. Hope you enjoyed my reviews for the Vipco Screamtime Collection. I definitely enjoyed making them. It was a lot more time consuming than I imagined, but it was nice to finally sit down and watch some of these films because a lot of them I hadn't actually seen going into this. And also, I feel like I've not wasted my money now, which is good. So this is going to be a bit of a looser episode. It's not very tightly scripted or anything like that, so I might ramble on a little bit about various things. But yeah, we're just going to be talking about final thoughts and just a few bits and bobs about Vipco as a company and the releases themselves. So to start off with, I'd say compared to the last review show that I did on the Dead of Night collection, which is in that back corner over there where it belongs, in the back corner, I'd say that Vipco was more consistent with its quality. Now, it's by no means good quality, but the films were more consistently watchable, I'd say. But saying that, with the nostalgic popularity and infamy of Vipco, I was expecting a little bit better. And overall, a little bit disappointed with the company as a whole, with the releases that we got. And I'm wondering if it is a case that Vipco was just the best of a bad situation for companies releasing this sort of film around the 80s to the 2000s, because it sure does feel that way. So to make this video a little bit easier, I'm splitting it up into sections. So let's get cracking with the first section. So for the films, we really were all over the place with this release company. We had some of the best giallo Italian horrors I've ever seen, and we also had some of the worst bottom of the barrel slashers, piles of crap that I've ever seen. So as you can see here, I have arranged them in order of best to worst. Don't worry, there'll be some nice shots coming up so you can check out the actual order of things. But let's just talk now about the best, the number one best, and the number 45 bottom worst film. Let's start with the best, shall we? For those who've seen the reviews, you can probably guess what I'm going to say for this one. Of course, The Zombie Dead. I did mention this a hell of a lot. I kept bringing it up, saying that other films just weren't quite as good as this one. Still got the weird hair coming off it. No idea what that's about. You see that, right? Really odd. The Zombie Dead just made me laugh quite consistently. I was engaged. It had some really good effects. It was weird as hell. And I have watched this at a party with friends, and it really heightens the experience. This is a must-watch for fans of bizarre zombie films. That boy in it. It makes me laugh every time I think about it. It is a fantastic film. And the print was pretty good and all that sort of stuff. We'll talk about that more later. We're trying to judge it based just on the films here. We're not trying to go too far into the quality of the print and stuff like that. Just based on films alone, this one was fantastic. And what was your worst? Well, you probably know what the worst was as well if you've watched this series through. Of course it was Drive-In Massacre. What a piece of shit film this was. Only 70 minutes long, but they managed to just make that 70 minutes the most unenjoyable 70 minutes I've had watching a film for the past few years, honestly. It was boring, nothing really happened, it was just a lot of talking and a massive waste of time. Avoid this film at all cost. There are much better films, and it even had a crappy gimmick tacked on at the end. So, that was the best and the worst. So now let's have a little look a bit deeper to see what my top 5 and bottom 5 were. My top 5, I think, are hands down the best films Vipco bothered with on this label, which are The Zombie Dead, The Beyond, City of the Living Dead, Stage Fright, and Case of the Bloody Iris, in that order. All Italian horrors, with 2 being from Fulci as well, which I think definitely speaks to my tastes quite a bit. These are for sure films that I'll be rewatching in the future. And the bottom 5, probably the most anticipated bit, they are The Slayer, The Deadly Spawn, Death Screams, The Dungeon, and Drive-In Massacre, all in that order. A lot of these were mainly just very boring. It was more that there wasn't enough stuff happening in it, and I think that's basically the crux of why they're in the bottom. Things like Deadly Spawn and Dungeon, obviously, they were also butchered by the print. As I said earlier, I am trying to separate the film and the print as best as I can, but for something like Death Screams, it's very difficult to do. Outside of obviously choosing the films at their release, it was also Vipco's job to do the print, to remaster these films to make them worth rebuying again on DVD as opposed to VHS. And I mean, it even says on the cases, look, digitally remastered. And there were some really good examples of that. There were some fantastic prints here. Ghost House, Stage Fright, they looked amazing. They were clean and clear, and I'd say probably an upgrade from the VHS releases. But then you have those other releases that they put out where they clearly just couldn't be bothered. A lot of VHS rips, unfortunately. Really low quality, low resolution, and it kind of made some of these films unwatchable, such as Grave of the Vampire or The Dungeon, which just looked ridiculous. Then of course you have things like Death Screams, which they definitely did the dirty on. And I really struggled to review that film compared to all the other films because there was a massive scene completely in the wrong order. So you're watching the film completely out of order, and I don't know how they missed that in the restoration process as they say. And then of course the other majorly butchered film was The House at the Edge of the Park, which was more butchered on because of the BBFC. But I was thinking about this, and around the time that these DVDs specifically were coming out, which is around 2003, now around that time, I'm guessing that if Vipco had have appealed some of these cuts, they probably could have got them either reduced or completely retracted altogether. But it seems to me, especially with the prints, that all they did was they took a pre-cut VHS version of the film, did a little bit of cleanup, whacked it on a DVD to make a bit of quick cash. Or so it seems anyway with some of these, and if that is the case, it's a big shame really, it is a big shame. Because some of them it does feel like they did try. As for the cases and the menus and such, they definitely did a much better job than the Dead of Night collection. Hands down, there were fewer spelling errors and the menus were a bit more consistent. But also then you can see that they were starting to get lazy towards the end. A lot of spelling errors in the menus, filmographies, they just really struggled to get that one right. And worst back of the case award definitely goes to Island of Death. That was just a weird garbled mess that went on for far too long. I have to say that overall, special features were very disappointing for this collection. You've got like just a bunch of repeated stuff for most of it, and 2 out of the 4 repeated trailers aren't even released under the Screamtime label. It's weird because towards the beginning, we had 2 releases that actually had things that were worthy of being called special features on them. On Island of Death, you had an interview with the director, and on City of the Living Dead, you had an interview with the lead actress. And then they just kinda gave up. And let us not forget the fabled, the bizarre, the anomaly that was the trailer for Tim. What the hell was that all about? You can say, I guess, definitively now, that the Screamtime Collection advertises 6 different films. 5 of those are horror films, and the other one is Tim, some bloody sappy daytime romance film with Catherine from Twin Peaks in it, and Mel Gibson, wasn't it? Was it Mel Gibson? Something like that. I'm gonna have to check that film out at some point. I haven't seen it yet. I'll find a copy somewhere. And as soon as we're talking about trailers, as if for unrelated films as well, as if they're classed as special features, let us not forget the trailer for The Claw, Now that was a really odd one because it kept coming and going for a bit and then it just stuck around until the end. Now, it's a really odd film for them to advertise, I feel anyway, because it's not a film that they released, and if you try looking it up these days, it had a name change at some point and it's now rebranded as a Christmas film. That's another one to add to the pile that I'm going to have to check out at some point. If we're comparing, and we are comparing, I would say that the Dead of Night collection did special features better. I know. Dead of Night did something better than Vipco. But, if memory serves, the Dead of Night actually had relevant trailers to the film that you were watching, and even had like extra features. There were interviews and there were soundtracks. A lot of the films had the soundtrack included, which is like way better than just some filmography spelt slightly wrong. But then, I guess you can argue, the Screamtime Collection is Vipco's budget release. You're probably wondering, what future for Vipco? Vipco's been bust for years. Nope, Vipco is back. And it's producing films now, and it's doing a film competition as well. Don't know if it's a scam or not, so this isn't an advertisement for that. But if you're interested in Vipco, it might be worth keeping an eye on. They've also already got a film out as well, which I can't really remember the name of, so just give me 1 second. The film is called Devil in the Woods, very generic name, and it looks god awful. It looks shit. Getting terrible reviews, so of course I'm going to have to check that one out at some point. Let's see what Vipco are up to these days, shall we? Remember that website that I mentioned as well in the first episode, I think it was? Well, don't go on that website anymore. It's gone. It's because Vipco's been rebranded because they're doing more stuff with the Vipco label. It's got a new website, so the old website's been taken down. It's a shame. I got a lot of my information from that website. That's how I figured out exactly what films were in the collection and bits and bobs like that, what number, what catalogue number they were and all that sort of stuff. And this whole thing has just made it that little bit harder to research Vipco, unfortunately. One last thing to end on with this section, I would say, is that Spookies has got a re-release on Special Edition Blu-ray, thanks to 101 Films. And included in this Special Edition Blu-ray is the Vipco documentary that I mentioned. Now, I think I mentioned that in episode 1 as well, which again, still haven't seen. Haven't been doing my extracurricular activity ever. But I do really want to check it out, and I'll probably grab it at some point. I was umming and ahhing whether to buy the Blu-ray, but honestly, I just don't want another copy of Spookies in my house. After all this talk of Vipco, you might be wondering, is it worth collecting Vipco now? And I would have to say no. No. But don't dismiss Vipco either. Now, if you're like me, then you'll have a deep set nostalgia for this sort of film. And if that is the case, like a low, cheap, dirty print, crappy, you don't know what you're going to get version, then you might get something from collecting these. But I'm sure a lot of you might think you like that, and then you'll start, and then the big problem will arise, and you'll realise that you're making a bit of a mistake. And that big problem is how many re-releases there are these days. Back when I was a kid, till about 5 years ago, Vipco was the perfect option for me. I was skint and I needed to see some weird ass horror. And you'd pop down to CEX or the local market and you'd pick up a Vipco film and it'd scratch that itch. But these days, you've got companies, these huge Blu-ray companies like 88 Films, Arrow, 101 Films, Shameless, Second Sight, even bloody Criterion have released some weird shit. And you look at these versions of these films, they're picking out old B-movies that you didn't even remember watching when you were a kid. and they're giving them special editions with special features, soundtracks, posters, amazing artwork, and so much care and attention. And it's like, why would you not get that, you know? I mean, it's easier as well these days to find an Arrow Blu-ray than it is to find a Vipco DVD, it seems. Now, obviously, there are some films that Vipco have put out that haven't been re-released. And if you really need to see these films, then what harm can buying the only version available do to you? Unless you're willing to import, but I'm not really dabbled in that area yet, so I'm not versed enough. For me, I've not been importing, so it's either Vipco or bust on a lot of these films. But if that's not the case, then I would strongly suggest giving your money to a company who cares. And some of these 2K, 4K restorations, you might think, yeah, but a grainy, old, dirty film, that's what I want, that's the aesthetic I want. And sometimes that can work, but rarely can that work. Watching a nice 2K restoration of a B movie, it can really give you that appreciation for it that you didn't even know you had. And there we have it. I think we've now officially talked Vipco to death, and I need a break. But there is another DVD release that I'm yet to talk about that interests me. And for those observant viewers out there, you may have noticed it popping up in the background of these reviews. But that's for another time. Thanks for watching.